And welcome to Hannity, and this is a Fox News alert. We have a lot of breaking news about the Florida high school shooter confessing to killing 17 people. And also breaking at this hour, new questions about how all of the warning signs surrounding the gunman, Nikolas Cruz, were missed, what went wrong, and why did so many red flags go unnoticed. We're going to have a comprehensive discussion tonight. Also tonight, in the face of unspeakable evil, violence, tragedy, people rose up to protect other people. We're going to show you the heroes that saved lives at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. And while politicians, the media, they're all pointing fingers, placing game, giving you the same predictable talking points tonight, we will offer solutions. How do we protect students at schools all across the country? Answers. That is in tonight's Breaking News opening monologue. All right, we start tonight with breaking news and details about the investigation into this horrific, tragic Florida high school shooting. Now, the 19-year-old gunman, Nikolas Cruz, he has now confessed to slaughtering 17 innocent people and wounding at least a dozen others. Now, Cruz is also telling investigators details of the sinister attack. He shot students in the hallway. He fired into 5 separate classrooms. And Cruz also confessed to authorities that he had extra ammunition in his backpack. Now, we're also learning disturbing new details of missed warning signs in what is now one of the worst mass shootings in American history. All of the red flags were there, but tragically, Nikolas Cruz was able to commit this heinous act. Now, the FBI is in fact confirming tonight that in September, a YouTube user with the name Nikolas Cruz, spelled the name the same way as the shooter, was reported to the Bureau for writing, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." Now, the man who reported the comment says that the FBI visited him the following day, but the Bureau is saying today that it could not be determined the time, the location, and actual identity of who posted the comment. Now, our own Catherine Herridge, as she noted earlier today, all the FBI would have had to do is trace the IP address, which is a routine practice, to determine the location of the individual. For some reason, it didn't happen in this case. Now, the mayor of Broward County is saying that Nikolas Cruz was being treated at a mental health clinic, but stopped seeking treatment more than a year ago. And authorities are describing his social media posts as beyond disturbing. Just take a look at some of these pictures. You can see the suspect. He's seen posing with guns and knives and even dead animals. And former classmates of Cruz say he was a loner. He was obsessed with firearms. He liked to show off pictures of all of his weapons. Now, the Miami Herald is reporting that Cruz had been suspended for fighting and having ammunition in his backpack, and Cruz was then later expelled for disciplinary reasons and was attending a school in Broward County for at-risk students. Cruz also had problems at home. Both parents adopted him, and his brother are dead. His mother passed away in November. Now, the suspect was staying with a friend's family, and there were also reports of Nikolas Cruz having ties to a Florida-based white supremacist group. But law enforcement said earlier today that they haven't seen any of those connections. We'll continue to monitor. What's also very troubling tonight is how students are describing their former classmate. Now, this is what they say about the shooter, Nikolas Cruz. Let's watch.
He definitely had just something a little off about him. But it was just more or less that he was aggressive and quiet and shy about when he got aggressive.
Personality was very different.
He was a bit off. He would curse randomly in the middle of lunch. You know, he would just scream out random curse words, and he always just seemed a little bit off. You know, just something was wrong with him.
That it was a lot of crazy stuff that he did. Just not right for school. He got kicked out of school multiple times for this kind of stuff. Honestly, a lot of people were saying that it was going to be him, stuff like that. We threw a lot of kids threw jokes around like that, saying that he was going to be the one to screw up the school. But it turns out, everyone predicted it. That's crazy.
Now, just like with other mass shooters, there were signs, there were warnings of mental, social, emotional problems, but all the pieces were never put together to prevent this tragedy from happening. And like with many other shootings and terrorist attacks, Nikolas Cruz was telegraphing his intentions all over social media. Now, aside from the obvious fact that anyone that would commit these horrible acts of evil and violence are completely deranged, the one commonality between the gunman in Parkland, Florida, to Sutherland, Texas, to the church in South Carolina, Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, are mental health issues and mental illness. Now, during an address to the nation earlier today, the president offered his deepest condolences, and he highlighted this issue of mental health. Let's take a look.
We comfort the grieving and the wounded. And we hurt for the entire community of Parkland, Florida, that is now in shock and pain and searching for answers. To law enforcement, first responders, and teachers who responded so bravely in the face of danger, we thank you for your courage. We are committed to working with state and local leaders to help secure our schools and tackle the difficult issue of mental health. Later this month, I will be meeting with the nation's governors and attorney generals. Where making our schools and our children safer will be our top priority. It is not enough to simply take actions that make us feel like we are making a difference. We must actually make that difference.
Profound words from the president saying it's not enough to feel better, it's got to make a difference. Now, the president is planning to visit Parkland, Florida, and offer comfort and support to the community. Details have not yet been finalized. Also, predictably, within hours, Democrats, the liberal media, they race as they always do to politicize a tragedy and try to blame, believe it or not, President Trump and Republicans. Let's take a look.
Step up, be a man, and talk about it, and stop thinking about the NRA and your next campaign donation. Just stop. Everyone knows what you're doing, and it's time. That does it for us this morning. Stephanie Rule picks up the coverage right now.
Thanks so much, Mika. Thanks, Joe. And to Marco Rubio, you don't have to step up and be a man. Step up and be a human.
Words of consolation, talk about mental health, are simply not enough. They must be followed by real action. The president has to lead or get out of the way.
The people have got to say enough is enough. We're not continuing with all these massacres. And we've got to have the representatives of the people in the halls of government respond to that.
This has happened with Republican administrations, under Democratic administrations, but what you see there, it's shameful, it's disgusting, but it's not surprising because it's so predictable. It happens every single time there is a shooting. Hollywood celebrities, they were also quick to post their hateful messages, of course, aimed at the president. Republicans on Twitter. Let's start with Chelsea Handler tweeting, quote, "We have to elect candidates that are not funded by the NRA in November. We have an opportunity to elect candidates who won't allow kids to go to school and get shot. It's disgusting how many times this has happened, and Republicans do nothing. You all have blood on your hands." Bette Midler, another school shooting, this in Florida. Congrats to the spineless cowards who do nothing to help us stem this horrific epidemic in Congress. And Director Adam McKay posted, "Normal person, oh my God, kids are being killed in schools, churches, concerts. Let's do something. Republican congressman, kids are being killed in schools and churches and concerts. Let's not do one single thing. Hashtag blood on your hands at GOP and at NRA." Author Stephen King writes, Broward school shooting. There will be prayers from Blabbermouth Don, Pence, and the Grinch, and their right-wing cohorts. There will be no call for any sort of sane gun regulations. Now, that, sadly, is the left solution every single time this happens. They rush to judgment, they want to point fingers and blame, and use all kinds of vicious, horrific rhetoric. It never accomplishes anything. Now, they shouldn't be what these tragedies are about here. You have people rolling out the same old, tired talking points and political arguments. You know, liberals, they start blaming the weapon that the shooter used, in this case an AR-15. But if they want to ban AR-15s and these madmen, they will use something else. We saw that at Virginia Tech, where a gunman used a pistol and killed 32 people. Look, let's get to solutions tonight. I have been in radio for 30 years of my life. This is my 23rd year at the Fox News channel. I know all of the talking points, and I know it's all just noise, and it's not going to solve the problem. Here's a simple truth. You're not going to change people's minds with a political debate, especially as it relates to the Second Amendment. I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. My mind's not going to be changed. I've thought this through all these years in my life, and I doubt I can change the minds of any of these Hollywood liberals and the anti-Second Amendment crowd. The problem this country is facing right now is school safety. Now, we can keep repeating the same talking points and talking over each other again and again and again after something like this happens, or maybe it's trying to actually find a solution to this problem. The children of this country deserve to be protected. They deserve safe schools. As the president said, no child, no teacher should ever be in danger in an American school. We can all agree on that. No parent should have to fear for their son or daughters when they kiss them goodbye in the morning. Now, I want to lay out a solution that I think is not political, and frankly, I believe any reasonable person can agree on. This is about the safety and security of students and children in our schools. And every single school in the country needs immediately a comprehensive threat assessment done by law enforcement professionals. Every school has a unique situation. And for those that will say, where are we going to get the money for this? Well, I would argue that it's probably more than likely local police, local FBI would be happy to help schools figure out the best plan of action to protect these kids and keep them safe. Now, you're going to have to secure the perimeter of every school. All points of entry must be secure. You got to make sure that there is a system that controls who is going in and out of the building. And in addition to that, you'll need a strong physical security presence. And you can start by hiring trained, armed, former or retired police officers, trained, armed, former, retired, armed military veterans. In other words, let's give our kids the same security that most politicians that they get. Let's give them the same protection that actors and actresses get on the red carpet when they're at the Oscars and pretty much everywhere else they go. We have plenty of retired officers, plenty of trained professionals, plenty of trained military guys. They can conceal their weapons, but their very presence also with a strategic plan that is properly implemented will bring about a profound change. I know there are probably detractors out there. They're going to say, but Sean, Parkland, Florida High School, they had an armed security guard. Okay, here's the thing. The school has 3,000 students. It's one of the biggest campuses in Florida. You're going to need more than one person to properly assess and deter any potential threat at a facility that large. We need enough people to protect every single building, every point of entry, and the entire perimeter. Now, some of you will argue, okay, this is going to cost money. You're right. My answer is yes. But is it not worth every penny so that we never, ever have to turn on our TVs like yesterday and see this unfold ever again like what happened in Parkland? Now, here's another point about the plan. Now, we already know it works. I broadcast from New York City, and post 9/11, you cannot enter a single office building without a work ID. I have a radio building I enter. I have a TV building I enter. And if you're a visitor in any of these buildings, you have to present a valid identification, or else you're not getting in, and you have to be vouched for by people that have been secured and are already in the building or work in the building. Every student can have their own valid ID before entering the school, and also, where needed, metal detectors, which have already proven to be effective in some schools in the country. Here's the bottom line. We are at a crossroads. It's time to either step up, do our job, create school safety that will work for these kids. Give them the same safety our politicians, actors, actresses, and famous people get. And instead of bringing out the same old talking points and trying to score cheap political points and trying to outdo each other with the same arguments, same attacks, nobody's mind's being changed. Maybe for once we could solve the problem. And this should be all about solutions. Now, I'm not saying this plan is flawless. Nothing is ever going to stop 100% of these things from happening. There is evil in the hearts of other people, unfortunately, in this world. But why wouldn't we try to do every single thing we can do in this case to prevent these tragedies from occurring and make them less deadly if, in fact, they do happen? Here's a simple test and a question for everybody tonight I think they can ask themselves. If, God forbid, you ever found yourself in any type of administrative building and that building has an active shooter, would you prefer to know that there are trained, armed, retired military and police already on site to give you a fighting chance? Would you want to know that there was a complete threat assessment, security assessment on that building that was completed? My guess is you probably would. Now, here's our final point. Democrats, they say gun control leads to less violence. Well, if that's the case, I'd like them to explain why cities with the highest murder rates have the strictest gun control and are run by Democrats. Look at these stats about the number of murders in 2016. All of these cities have Democratic mayors and have been run by liberals for years. Yet their crackdowns on the Second Amendment, it has done nothing to stop violence. Liberals also don't want you to know about these shocking statistics. During the Obama presidency, there were over 3,900 murders in his adopted hometown of Chicago, and more than 18,000 people who were shot in Chicago just during the last 6 years of his presidency. Now, did you remember hearing this kind of outrage and blame by the left about the out-of-control violence? That's one American city. And liberals also love to say that giving people the right to carry doesn't prevent crime. The figures say otherwise. Let's take a look at some of the charts given to us by author, More Guns, Less Crime, John Lott Jr. from the Crime Prevention Research Center. The chart shows violent crime before and after right to carry laws were enacted in the U.S. And as you can see, having more citizens armed leads to a decrease in violent crime. Here's another graphic on murder rates before and after right to carry laws were put into place. Also in the U.S., murders have plunged as a result. And as John Lott Jr. points out, as more people carry guns, you see further drops in both of those statistics. All right, a lot to absorb. The answer is we got to protect our kids. We don't need to tune into what we saw yesterday ever again. Let's start solving the problem. Here with reaction, the host of Justice with Judge Jeanine Pirro. Judge, any court, that you walk into in America, I have to go through a metal detector, anyone I've ever been in. I also have to present an ID in any court I've ever been to. Every time I've been to Congress, every RNC convention, every DNC convention, every ball game I go to, and every office building in New York. Can we not do something better instead of the same old arguments?
Well, Sean, you're so right. And what you said certainly rang true to me, where whenever something like this happens, we go to the old argument. The Second Amendment people say, the right of the individual to possess a bear arm shall not be infringed. And then on the left, they say that guns kill people. I think shooters kill people. But let me start by saying, Sean, number one, that as a DA, I would often have to tell a parent that their child was a victim of a homicide. So my heart goes out to all of those parents and all of those people who knew the victims here. But we need to be very clear. This is not a political issue. This is not an issue about the left and the right and the NRA. Actually, I'm sick of hearing the NRA. And in the interest of full disclosure, let me say I have many guns. I have long guns. I have handguns. But this is really about the individual. And in this case, an individual who not only threatened and posted himself on YouTube as someone who wanted to be a professional school shooter, but that individual had been expelled from school. He had all kinds of personal problems, and yet he was able to purchase a gun. Why was he able to purchase a gun? Because background checks, to be honest with you, are a joke in the sense that if you're on psychotropic drugs, if you've been in a mental institution, HIPAA law protects us, and I used to sign pistol permits all the time as a judge. It prevents us, the HIPAA laws, from finding out what your mental history is. So all the wackadoos from Adam Lanza and all the school shooters, Aurora, Columbine, they can get a gun with no problem, although some of them got them from their parents, but that's not the point. You are absolutely right. We need to protect kids, and that means we've got to have metal detectors. We've got to have experienced cops. I don't care if they're retired or they're still cops working in the schools. And we've got to be able to have perimeter controls. We've got to have teachers who can carry a weapon and react to this kind of nonsense, because our kids deserve our protection, Sean.
Look, I'm not saying it's good. I know schools that right now, if you're a parent, there's only one door you're getting in, that they do have security at these schools. There's only one door. And even if they know you, I've gone into schools where, hi, Mr. Hannity, I need your ID. First thing they would say.
Yeah.
No exceptions.
You can do that at a building in New York City. They'll say, hi, Judge Jeanine. Do you have your ID? Wait a minute. We're in New York City. You know who I am. But I agree with you, Sean. What we had here, though, was a warning that we haven't had in other cases. And with all due respect to the FBI, if they deserve it, based on everything we're hearing about, I don't want to hear another FBI agent go up to a microphone and say, we had no further identifying information. Wait a minute. You're the FBI. Some guy did the right thing, and he called you, and he said, this kid is on YouTube saying, I want to be a professional school shooter. How many people in this country have the name Nicholas Cruz? How many people in this country have the name Nicholas with a K? How many of them have bought a gun? If we learned anything from 9/11, it's that the federal agencies don't connect with each other. This kid, all the warnings were there. All they needed to do was connect the dots, and they didn't.
No, I think, Judge, you couldn't say it any better. All right, we appreciate your insight, and we'll be watching you this weekend, and you're in for me tomorrow night, and people will be watching. Thanks, Judge. When we come back, President Trump, we have a lot of breaking news, vowing tough action on mental health following the shooting massacre in Florida. Ed Henry has details and so many more angles, and we'll introduce you to the heroes from yesterday. Straight ahead.
Door and let us in. I had thought he was behind me.
This is Mr. Beagle.
But he wasn't.
What happened?
When he opened the door, he had to relock it so we can stay safe. But he didn't get the chance to.
A student describing how her geography teacher was killed yesterday, protecting her and her fellow classmates during the shooting. And that is not the only incredible act of heroism that we're hearing about tonight. Joining us now with a lot more is Fox News' Trace Gallagher. A lot of heroes here that have come up. Trace.
Yeah, a bunch, Sean. Most schools, including this one, have active shooter drills, giving students and teachers some guidelines on how to react. But experts say during a genuine attack, instinct takes over. And in this case, the instinct of 37-year-old assistant football coach and security guard Aaron Feis was to throw himself in front of students to shield them from the bullets. The coach was shot and later died in surgery. Those who knew him say he died the same way he lived, putting himself second. Watch.
I mean, he was a big man. He sprinted with everything he had towards it to make sure everybody was safe. And I heard that he got in front of a couple people and shielded them, and he actually took the bullets for them.
I don't know when Aaron's funeral is. I don't know how many adults are going to go, but you'll get 2,000 kids there. The kids in this community loved him. They adored him. He was one of the greatest people I knew.
And witnesses say that geography teacher you mentioned, Sean, Scott Beagle, knew that kids in the hallway were in danger, so he opened his classroom door to let them in. But when he tried to relock the door, the shooter walked by at that very moment, and he was shot and killed. Students inside his classroom say he got in the way of the killer and likely saved many lives. Several other teachers also barricaded their doors and hid their students. And then there was the story of the unnamed janitor, who witnesses say helped save the lives of students who were unknowingly running toward the shooter. They say the janitor told them to run the other way and ushered them into a classroom for safety. Listen.
He stopped us, and he got us into Chef Kurth with Chef Kurth's help into her classroom. I would say about 30 to 40 students into this teacher's classroom at the same time. And as a result of their heroic actions, they saved probably all of our lives, about 40 of us.
Yeah, amazing to think. Amazing to think that within seconds, many students witnessed both the epitome of evil and the height of heroism, and many other stories we have yet to hear about. Sean.
Amazing heroism. Thanks, Trace, for that report. We appreciate it. And earlier this morning, the president delivered a powerful address to the nation, and he says he plans to travel to Parkland, Florida in the coming days. Live from Pompano Beach in Florida with much more, Fox News chief national correspondent, our own Ed Henry. Ed.
Sean, good to see you. When you want to talk about heroes, I can tell you this time last night at this medical center that I'm standing in front of, there were fears that the death toll of 17 was going to rise. There were still people in critical condition, people here working around the clock to save lives, doctors, nurses, first responders. And I can tell you tonight there's a glimmer of hope. There's only one patient left in critical condition. They're still rallying around that patient. The president giving his thanks certainly today, grateful for everyone springing into action, but also trying to heal the nation as he spoke from the White House. Listen.
We are committed to working with state and local leaders to help secure our schools and tackle the difficult issue of mental health. Later this month, I will be meeting with the nation's governors and attorney generals, where making our schools and our children safer will be our top priority. It is not enough to simply take actions that make us feel like we are making a difference.
Now, remember, after that horrific shooting in Las Vegas, the President and First Lady Melania Trump didn't just talk to families of victims. They also went in, met with doctors at a medical center, the nurses, the first responders, to thank them. I'm told by the doctors here today that without the EMT technicians jumping on this quickly and stopping the bleeding, there would have been many, many more lost lives. And so the President will be here in South Florida at Mar-a-Lago this time tomorrow night. Sean, there's nothing on the official schedule just yet, but one official suggested to me that as early as Saturday morning, the President is likely to be either at this medical center, the high school, somewhere in this region, wanting to show more directly his thanks for everything that everyone on the ground here has done, Sean.
All right, Ed Henry, thanks so much for that report. We appreciate it. Joining us now with more, we have former LAPD detective, Fox News contributor Mark Furman, former FBI special agent Manny Gomez. Mark, I've known you a lot over the years. We don't often disagree. You see a couple of flaws in what I think. You're never going to convince an anti-gun person to be pro-Second Amendment. And similarly, I've carried a weapon almost all my adult life. I've had carry permits in New York, California, Alabama, Georgia, and Rhode Island. I've had carry permit. I was trained since I'm 11 in the use of a firearm. So you're not going to win on that debate. But securing the schools with the professionals, to me, is 1,000% doable. And we owe it to the kids to do this.
We do. We do, and the only thing that I don't disagree with you, I just think that there's a better approach. When you have retired personnel, they have the best part of their career behind them, and you need a generational gap that isn't 2 or 3 generations, perhaps just better part of one. These officers on the school need to be able to interact with these students and get that information that a guy like Cruz would have surfaced and they would have actually confided in the officer. You need to get some kind of a system where you have protocols for all these schools so everybody is working off the same sheet of music, and you need to harden the inside target so the suspect can't get in, and you create the tactical situation for a shooter on the outside, which allows responding officers and the security officers to take out the suspect with no danger to the students. I think this is all possible without gun control.
All of it is, and strategically and tactically, look, my guess, Manny, is you're going to have retired military, retired police, or maybe active. And I think you can even work in conjunction with local law enforcement to get this done. And again, it would be concealed carry. I would think probably a lot of people, a lot of the students would become friends with these guys over time. And Mark's right, we can get a lot of intelligence from them. But strategically, tactically, you surround the perimeter. You have a full threat assessment, security assessment. We know the entry point at any point. And all of this, everybody gets in is known. Nobody that is unknown gets into that school, period, end of sentence. It seems doable if we choose to do it.
I totally agree. Having the experience of former military, former law enforcement, we just had a wonderful piece where the coach from this high school saved lives. This is a coach that knew these students. He was a father figure, perhaps, certainly an adult figure to these young men and women. That's what we need. We need people that these young people will respect, look up to if they have problems, whether it's a active shooter situation or on a more day-to-day basis, a drug condition, a criminal condition, a bullying condition. They will go up to these former law enforcement, former military role models and be able to discuss with them what they could do to help the situation. So it'll be a win-win-win on a daily basis. That's
Mark, you said something. If they're there every day, look, I was a kid smoking in the bathroom. I got to know the janitors, everybody, because they wouldn't rat me out for when I was young and stupid. But in all seriousness, they're going to get to know these kids. Those kids are going to open up to them. And all the things we've heard that the kids are now saying post this shooting, these guys will have heard earlier. And they have the training and the knowledge and how to intervene in a situation like that.
Agreed.
No, I agree, Sean. When you have somebody that's inside a system like a school, you have to not only have security, you have to be able to have investigative skills to be able to very effectively and sometimes under the radar investigate some of these problems that you see or that are reported to you. But just remember that all security, from the protection of the president to anything that the FBI does, the Israelis, anybody will tell you, security is a layered event. It's not just one. You have layers of security, so you always contemplate a failure of one or something that fails or something is taken out. You need a layer of security no matter what, and a school especially.
All right, thank you both. If every American demands this in their district, we will have safer schools. 1,000% safer. All right, when we come back, we'll have a heated debate. Dan Bongino, Geraldo Rivera, who is down in Florida. As we continue, stay with us. All right, following yesterday's deadly shooting in Florida, Democrats, members of the media, so quick to politicize a tragedy. Take a look.
The pattern will be perfectly predictable. There will be a moment of silence. People will wish everybody thoughts and prayers and sympathy for the victims. And then the Congress of the United States will do absolutely nothing.
And that city you're in, Washington, if you match it against public opinion polls of their constituents, the lawmakers in that city are failing American people every day.
I just really don't know what the body count needs to be before people in Washington, D.C. give a rat's ass about the people in this country and their children.
This one is the 18th school shooting just this year, but also the day-by-day deaths that are preventable, and we have an obligation to prevent. Congress has been complicit. Congress bears responsibility.
All right, joining us now with reaction, Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino. All right, Geraldo, last night we got a lot of reaction, and you're rightly, this has to end. I share your passion, and I know how sincere you are. Then you went into this AR-15 argument. I don't want to change this into a gun debate because I think we better transcend it quick. I will never convince you that on the issue of guns, and I own AR-15s. You're never going to convince me. So if we get rid of the AR-15, Virginia Tech was the worst shooting in history, and that was a pistol. So we'll get rid of the AR-15, we'll get rid of the pistol. What about securing the schools? What about the retired military, trained, armed, police, military guys, securing the perimeter? A real plan like we have for actresses and actors and politicians.
You know, brother, I totally endorse your campaign to harden our schools. I think that Detective Furman laid it out in very explicit terms with the layered defense and so forth, and I can't top that. I am 100% behind you in that, Sean. But I think that people have to get their arms around a harsh reality that in the state of Florida and many other states, a psycho, disturbed, expelled 18-year-old who's talking about being the next schoolyard shooter can legally purchase an AR-15 military-style assault weapon. This is a kid who can't buy a beer in this state. I think that it is outrageous and illogical, Sean. And listen, and we have to remember one thing. That AR-15 was banned. Sales of that weapon were banned in this country from 1994 until 2004.
And it didn't help.
Under the Brady ban.
Didn't help.
I mean, for 10 years, we didn't have it. It did help. I mean, let's do something. I mean, we can't have the kid who's fermenting all this evil inside him have such easy access. Not only does he get the machine.
All right, Dan.
Geraldo, listen, I appreciate your emotional involvement in this as well. It was a tragedy. But let's talk reality. The assault weapons ban, the Department of Justice's own study on the assault weapons ban said it did almost nothing to reduce firearms violence. So what you're suggesting, to be clear here, is what? That legal, law-abiding American citizens like me, right? I own an AR. Frankly, Geraldo, I like you, I respect your opinion, but I don't care about your opinion about what weapons I should have. Why should I be stopped because you want to, wait, hold on, because you want to reinstitute a ban that the Department of Justice itself said had almost no effect on firearm violence.
Have you, Dan, wait a second. Have you heard, hold it, Dan. Have you heard from the children in this school? Have you heard from the children going up to the news teams and telling them how disappointed they are in the adults and that you have to do something? That you have to or get off the pot? Yeah. I mean, stop with the thoughts and prayers. If I hear one more politician tell me about the dead 17 kids are in their thoughts and prayers, I don't care about their thoughts and prayers anymore.
Geraldo,
I care about what they're going to do to keep my child safe.
I've got kids. And you know what? Listen, you were a war correspondent at one point. I was a police officer. I've actually been shot at. And you know what? I had a firearm to defend myself. You know, and suggesting somehow that we are going to make these kids, some of whom are dead, safer by disarming and making them sheep in a school and by stopping legal law-abiding people from getting guns is not the solution. It's entirely disingenuous to claim the moral high ground on that.
Hold on. I have been at Fox News for 17 years. I understand how my feelings on this are not in sync with the majority of my audience. I apologize for that. But you have to know how deeply I feel about this. When an 18-year-old who has been expelled from school, whether he's orphaned or he leaves his foster family or he's shooting in the backyard and he's telling other friends, you got to come see my guns, when that kid can go up to this gun seller here and legally purchase an AR-15 with 30-round clips, the standard clips, and buy a half a dozen of them and extra ammo. And this is the same kid, this is the same punk, psycho, loser kid who can't buy a Budweiser because he's underage. If everyone doesn't see how illogical that is, then I feel sorry for people. If you can't, if your embrace of the Second Amendment is so fervent and blind.
Remember, 32, the worst U.S. school shooting, 32, it was a pistol. But let me go back. I think I'm proving a point here. We're not going to convince either side in this debate. You're not going to convince Dan. You're not going to convince me. We're not going to convince you. I think the answer, and I'll throw it to Dan first, is to protect the schools. Full security markups of every school, secure perimeters, entry points only, and armed retired military police. Dan.
Sean, it's the only way. You know, I was a cop. When I used to sit in the cell, sometimes I would talk to the criminals we arrested on gun crimes. America, are you listening to me? Criminals don't care. They don't give a damn about your gun laws. Matter of fact, they love your gun laws. You know why? They get to prey on a bunch of innocent sheep out there. I'm not disputing Geraldo's authenticity here or his genuine passion for this at all. I'm simply suggesting that the solution he presents is an irrational one that we both agree, Geraldo. This kid should have never been in possession of firearms. I'm simply saying your solution will not work. It is entirely irrational.
All right, real quick, we have 20 seconds.
I'm not going back to guns. I've got 5 kids. I've got a 12-year-old who's in middle school. I want her protected the way my money is protected in the bank. I want her protected the way we are when we go into airports. I want we always say, what's your most precious possession? My most precious possession are my children. We always say that. Let's put our money where our mouths are. I hope that the president, as he's coming down, and I know that he's coming here to Parkland, will also voice his concerns about this in a very deep and heartfelt way, in a sincere way. Right, I agree. But I definitely think we've got to look.
Geraldo, at the end of the day, we all agree on that point. And you can't tell me that if we can secure the airport, secure our planes, secure the Oscars red carpet, and help and everybody else that wants security, that we can't do it for our kids. That's a must. Good to see you both. Appreciate it. If you're a parent, you definitely want to see this next segment. We're going to tell you the warning signs to look for, and others. If you see it happening, see something, say something, that actually happened this time, but what should you be looking for? Now, including some behavior so bad he was expelled from school. Joining us now, psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Bober is with us, and also radio talk show host Dr. Gina Loudon. Dr. Loudon, we got into this last night. All the signs were there. People, see something, say something. Okay, they said something. The FBI was brought in. The evidence was all over social media. The kids had an inkling that something was very wrong with this young man.
Yeah, Sean, I've been on the ground enough here that I've spoken with a lot of the students. I spoke with my own children who go to school not too far from here. And the thing that everybody is saying is, yes, they want something done, as Geraldo said in your last segment. But I think that we have to really think about what we can do, taking politics maybe off the table and really honing in on what is practical to prevent the next shooting. And I would submit to you that it doesn't have anything to do with the things we're talking about. It has to do with the military, like you're talking about, being available in the school, retired military, Sean, and maybe we can stick something like that in the infrastructure bill, take politics away.
Yeah. Dr. Bober.
Yeah, take politics out of it. Just let's do what we agree on, right? And let's find solutions for these students, and then let's deal with the guns and the mental health and all the other stuff on the table.
Doctor, let me go to you too, Bober, and I want to ask you this. I heard from everybody, all right, there's going to be a lot of grief counseling. But when you got a kid that you got to throw out of school because he's got ammunition in his backpack, it would seem in everybody's best interest, and I know some colleges offer this, and maybe they have more of the resources to be able to do it, but it seems that schools should be able to intervene in a way to offer the mental health as soon as you see these signs.
Sean, you know what? A lot of people talk about mental illness. They talk about guns. This was the perfect storm that came together. Only 4% of firearm homicides are committed by people with mental illness. Mental illness is really not a risk factor for violence. The people who are mentally ill are much less risky they tend to be more the victims than the perpetrators. And as far as guns, we know that most people with guns are not violent people. But if someone is hell-bent on doing destruction and hurting a lot of people, it's going to happen. So there's very little that we can do to prevent these types of instances.
Well, I disagree in the sense, and I'll throw this to Dr. Loudon, in the sense that we saw every sign and symptom, social media footprint, what the kids knew about him, getting expelled from school.
So maybe we take Maybe we take what we know about this particular instance and we look for that perfect storm and those signals, and we put that child in some sort of counseling. But I think that we have to consider that, Sean, 70% of Americans are diagnosable by the DSM-5 today with some sort of mental issue. Are we going to revoke the rights, the Second Amendment rights of all 70% of Americans? That would be a problem. And military, by the way, rates even higher.
We gotta pay attention to the symptoms. Thank you both. We appreciate your insight, you being back.